we'll go to questions. Each candidate will get a minute to respond. Again, we like the minute. And hopefully there'll be a little time if there's some back and forth that we wish to go in. First question, we'll start again with Frank Riggs. All of you may have heard of a movement called Red for Ed. It made quite a spectacle and was able to argue, well, I mean, it argued that schools weren't adequately funded, and those feelings and the walk-ins coalesced into a protest movement that shut down Arizona schools statewide, pretty much statewide, in April. Question for Frank Riggs and the rest of you. What message did you take from the Red for Ed movement?
Well, I certainly understand the frustration that drove the Red for Ed movement. Education funding and therefore teacher compensation has been largely stagnant in our state for a decade, since the Great Recession. And in many instances, many districts, teachers have had to pay more, they've had to contribute more for their benefits. But I part company with the leadership of Red for Ed. These are highly partisan political operatives with a very clear political agenda. Here's what I want to do to address the concerns behind Red for Ed. I want to index per pupil funding to student enrollment growth and inflation. And in order to recruit and retain the very best teachers for Arizona students, I think we need to benchmark their compensation, that is to say their pay and benefits, against neighboring states in the Southwest region. So again, I understand the frustration, but I don't agree with the leadership of the Red for Ed movement.
Mr. Branch.
Thank you very much. I teach teachers at the doctorate level over at Grand Canyon. In fact, I teach at the #1, #2 Christian universities in the world, Liberty University and Grand Canyon. Many of my students are K-12 teachers, 12 to 14 years in classroom. And with those students, I know that many of them were significantly underpaid, and I understand that. However, the movement itself, Red for Ed, I was not for. When we all debated at LD 20, the current superintendent was not there, but everybody else said that they were Red for Ed. I said that I was not, and the reason why is because I believe that our teachers should have gotten raises. Many of them should have. However, the movement itself was not organic. We've seen it start over in West Virginia and move across, and to me, political ideology in schools like that have no purpose. Thank you.
Well, as a classroom teacher, I understand their frustration. After 16 years and a master's degree, I make $44,000 a year. For me, it's never been a complaint, but it's a reality. Funds obviously have depleted, also services and morale on the campus. This did not begin overnight. This began years ago. How do we address this? I like the other candidates here, parted ways. I understood their frustration, but parted ways as soon as they went on strike. You don't strike on kids. You just don't. That's not anyone's mission. And to be quite frank, most teachers didn't want to do it, but their schools were closed. My plan is to get more money into the classroom, but first we have to understand where the monies are. We need to audit our districts. We need to make a transparent, open checkbook on our ADE and our districts, and also we need to reform Prop 301 and move forward with more dollars into the classroom.
Thank you. Same question. What message did you take from Red for Ed to Mr. Gelbart?
So Red for Ed didn't come out of nowhere. Our teachers have really been toiling under low pay and poor working conditions for a long time, and that's where this came from. And I think what came out of it, the 20 by 2020 plan, I think was a great thing for our schools. We've had teachers all around Arizona already get wage increases from that plan. However, I did not support the walkout. Once Governor Ducey announced his 20 by 2020 plan, I think they should have called off the walkout. And I put out a statement on the first day of the walkout saying I thought it was a bad idea. I thought it could damage public support for future funding increases for education, which I do think are needed. And so that's what I take out of it. In West Virginia, remember, teachers there only got a 5% raise. So a 20% raise, including 10% that's already happened for our Arizona teachers, is a big deal.
Excellent. And Diane Douglas, I know you were asked to speak about this a lot, but in
Yes,
a minute, what was your take on the Red for Ed movement?
And I was out a week before the strike, imploring our teachers not to walk out. And despite rumors, I never threatened them, but I did feel it was my duty to apprise them of the potential consequence. I'm the only one that's been out for 3.5 years, thanks to my listening tours, advocating on behalf of our teachers, because that's the #1 message I heard from citizens as I traveled the state to bring them all to the table, was we want our teachers paid better. Unfortunately, in Arizona, we've had many promises. We had the lottery, we had Indian gaming, we had Prop 301 that all promised to go to our teachers, and yet none of them are an independent resource for K-12. So what we need to look at, in my opinion, is a revenue stream. But the message I took away from Red for Ed, unfortunately, in many ways, is a sad one, that now our parents are concerned about their children's classrooms and their teachers this year. We need to restore that trust.
Well, I guess kind of following up, there was a Facebook comment from Kyle Kennedy on Facebook who asked about if people supported any kind of tax increase to help, as he said, to properly fund public schools. You're calling for a revenue increase of some sort. I'll throw it open if anyone else wishes to jump into.
Well, Mrs. Douglas, you know, this is on the record. Mrs. Douglas has long proposed a 66% permanent $400 million a year increase in sales taxes, and at prior debates and forums, Mrs. Douglas then takes the opposite position, kind of debating herself, saying that she acknowledges that sales taxes are inherently regressive and disproportionately impact fixed and low-income individuals. More importantly, we are too dependent on the sales tax in Arizona. It accounts for more than 50% of all state government revenue.
Is there a type of tax you would support?
Yes, you know, and this, interestingly enough, in my interaction with the editorial board, somehow this got lost, but it's actually in my candidate questionnaire, in the voter guide. I have been calling for a moratorium on corporate income tax cuts. I've been very explicit about that. And by the way, I'm the only person up here who's been a CEO in the private sector and can walk that talk. But the fact of the matter is, I'll finish. The fact of the matter is that our state economy has fully recovered from the Great Recession. Our national economy has. We've cut federal corporate tax rates by 40%. And frankly, it's time for the business community, and particularly our large corporations and major employers in the state, to step up and invest more in K-12 education, because they have a vital interest in an educated.
So you're talking about closing some corporate loopholes?
Yes.
Mr. Branch.
Well, first of all, what Mr. Riggs said about is being the only one up here as a CEO is just not true. I've been a CEO of 2 different companies in my lifetime. Actually, I had a database development firm right before 9/11. So
Mr. Kennedy talked about.
But what I want to, yes, and I want to make this really clear. 2 points, though. First of all, Ms. Livingston said that, like the other candidates, I separated from Red for Ed. Well, I was never with Red for Ed. So, but another point that I would like to make, though, as far as tax increases, I stand with President Trump to dismantle the United States Department of Education. If we dismantle the United States Department of Education and we keep our money here, eliminate the bloated bureaucracy, the reality is we'll have more than enough money to fund our education system. So no, I don't support tax increases.
That's 2 ideas. Your idea, our reader would wish to know if you would raise taxes to support education.
You asking me?
Ms. Livingston.
Well, I guess we're going out of order. So,
right.
You know, I just want to comment that Mr. Riggs said he supports a corporate tax cut moratorium, but that won't raise any revenue. Just stopping more cuts won't raise any new revenue. So we need to look at potential new revenue sources. The Supreme Court has opened the door for gaming revenue, sports betting, and if the governor and the legislature decide to bring that to Arizona, then I would push to make sure that those tax revenues go toward education.
Gaming revenue, and I guess let's just clarify, you're talking about, and it's Ms. Livingston's turn next, so I just want to make sure, you're talking about halting new loopholes or going back and looking at
I'm talking about a moratorium on the phased corporate tax. And of course,
on new ones. Okay, so I guess,
and of course that would generate more revenue.
Right, going forward there might be more money coming in. Your thoughts on revenue?
Sure. Here's the thing. Right now we have about $6 billion from land trusts. We have Prop 301 monies, which I do believe need reform, because there's what we call in teaching buckets, and the buckets don't always get to the teachers. We also have 53% of our funding that goes into education. We're all sitting here not knowing where it goes. Let's first audit, let's first make it transparent, and then let's go to the next step. The House and the legislature right now are working on reform for Prop 301. Whether that's removing the buckets or taking the next step, I don't know what it is, but they're opening dialogue, looking at the consistent funding stream that started long ago for education and maximizing it and make it 2018. And that's what I'd like to work with the House and legislature on.
And Would you like to expand on your thoughts? You brought up revenue.
Well, and that's an issue. Prop 301 is one I have been talking about for well over a year. And yes, Mr. Riggs is correct. I'm not a fan of sales tax, but that is the readily available vehicle we had at that time to talk about. I was talking about a 0.4 cent increase, which would have generated a lot of money. We thankfully do have Prop 301 renewed, which would have been a horrible fiscal cliff for our districts and our school board members to have to deal with. So we have that piece. But what we really need to look at in Arizona is something new, not the same old ways. And one idea I've heard bantered about, which I think deserves discussion, is an excise tax, that instead of taxing our own citizens endlessly, we start bringing revenue into this state.
Interesting.
May I
Thank
add
you,
one-
Kyle Kennedy,
may I add one
for
quick
that
thing?
question. Very quick.
Very, very quick. Money doesn't create better education. Reform with dollars creates better education. So we do need to, whatever the system is that goes forward, let's make sure that we're having reform in our
And
educational
that brings us to our next one, because you'll still have a chance to talk about money
Okay.
here.